All right, I think it seems safe.
Think of Israel and Palestine as two countries at war, with this one, a state for Jewish people, occupying this one here, where Palestinians live. The truth is, both Israeli Jews and Palestinians live all over this territory, ruled by one government and one army, based on the idea of
advancing the supremacy and domination of one group of people, Jews.
And that is what guides its policies and its practices towards Palestinians.
In other words, apartheid.
I tuned in for aristocracy. What the fuck is that? But I tuned out as soon as they said HasanAbi. To see what they had to say in the situation. I heard them say that and I tuned out. I wish you would have listened. I want to know.
Apartheid is a loaded word tied to the racist South African regime of white minority rule. But although the word comes from there, apartheid isn't just a description of what happened in South Africa. It's actually a crime against humanity under international law. In 2021, Human Rights Watch accused Israel of carrying out apartheid. It based this accusation on the 1973 Apartheid Convention and the 1998 Rome Statute, which say that three elements have to occur for the crime of apartheid to apply. They are an intent by one group to dominate the other, systematic oppression by one racial group.
The situation is so fucked up. While all this is happening for decades, we are taught in Israel nothing of the sort. We are only taught about the wars Israel fought and how brilliant the IDF is. Yeah.
Group over another, and one or more inhumane acts, like denying people the right to leave and to return to their country, expropriation of landed property, and the creation of separate reserves and ghettos.
Wait, wow, that's crazy. That sounds... Fuck. Oh, wow. That literally describes the everyday lives of Palestinians.
So let's see if any of these apply to Israel's rule over Palestinians.
Like anyone who says Israel's regime is not an apartheid regime against Palestinians is just fucking delusional, dude. Like, not only are you a fucking coward, you're a morally abhorrent coward if you do not openly fucking admit that what Israel is doing is straight up an apartheid. I'm sorry.
About half of the people
Or uneducated? Yeah, there's a lot of people who are uneducated or rather blinded by propaganda. I personally did really want to know how important the history is before being able to criticize, though, not drama baiting. No, look, understanding the history of any sort of conflict is always important. It's always a good thing. It's kind of at the heart of what I do. I love to offer historical perspective whenever I'm talking about issues. So my anger is when people use how complicated. It's just complicated to just like try to avoid having a conversation about it. Okay? And that is unironically what people do whenever they say Hasan is not fucking educated enough to speak on these matters. They're literally saying it's too complicated. He's not well equipped to speak on these matters. And that's it. Like that's what that is. It's a way to fucking deflect.
people that live here under Israel's rule are Palestinian, and the other half are Jews, like myself.
For those 7 million Israeli Jews, almost the entire land is one space. Whether they're here, 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 or here.
Except for the Ottoman Empire, according to chat. Dog. Ottoman Empire bad, okay? It's an empire, okay? It's an empire. Shut the fuck up. Also, Ottoman Empire, when we're talking about the Ottoman Empire, we're talking about the history, okay? We're talking about history. Something that happened in the past, not ongoing shit. When I talk about the Turkish government's ongoing actions against Kurdish people as a whole, or when I talk about the Turkish foreign policy, I don't fucking mince words. I still tell you that it's bad and wrong. Just like the Ottoman Empire's existence was still predicated upon so much bloodshed. That's so fucking stupid. Yeah, cancel the Ottoman Empire, dog. Do it. Do it.
They have the same rights, privileges, and legal status. They can move freely, vote in the same elections, and live under the same laws. The boundaries are invisible to them. But for the 7 million Palestinians, the boundaries are very visible. Whereas this is essentially one space for Israelis, Palestinians have been divided into 4 areas.
Ottoman Empire, absolutely worse. It was predicated on basically enslaving people as well. Why'd you put basically, dude? Of course they fucking enslave people. Like, of course.
Each area gets a different colored ID card issued by Israel, and your life and rights are determined by that ID card. In Gaza, Palestinians have no freedom of movement and are under a complete
Aristocracy said that you are too uneducated to give a rational explanation of what's going on. Okay, I don't give a fuck. Also, I'm not gonna fucking go on like some random debate show, dude. Okay, a lot of that stuff is just like literally pointing to be like, hey, I want you to like come on this debate show or some shit like that, and that's why they like want to engage in this sort of take. Let's be real. Also, I'm sure that if you like see the entirety of the code, I'm sure that it was couched within like a lot of praise for what I do or some shit, but ultimately it doesn't matter. Don't shit on aristocracy. She's literally out there as a historian educating people on the Nakba. Okay, any fucking historian educating people on the Nakba is not gonna fucking turn around and be like, oh, your perspective is so uneducated. She rolled that back a lot. He wasn't characterizing that right. Like, I fucking doubt. She's not even a historian on this topic. She's wrong on so many things. Anyway. Dude, you gotta stop, dude. You've been posting this Google Doc for literally like the past week, dude. I'm not going to read this Google Doc on Sigma males. Okay, please stop. I see you. I'm not going to do it. So just fucking stop. No, I just timed him out.
Israeli blockade. Israel
You already debated her. Apparently, she has a video. When? Oh, is it like, I think it's the Discord
no
group,
longer
right?
has soldiers inside Gaza, but it controls every aspect of life from the outside. People in Gaza have no civil or political rights. They've got no say in the Israeli government that controls them.
Only times I've seen aristocracy was when she was defending the British monarchy and arguing that Israel isn't a colonialist nation. Wait, what?
Palestinians in the West Bank also have very limited freedom of movement, with their population divided into 165 disconnected cantons, cut off by Israeli military checkpoints, walls, settlements, and other infrastructure. They also have no civil or political rights in Israel. In East Jerusalem, Palestinians generally have more freedom to move, but Israel can take away their right to live in the city. They can't vote in Israeli elections, and Israel also bars them from taking part in Palestinian politics. Palestinians who are citizens of Israel can travel relatively freely, but they face restrictions on where they can live. They can vote in Israeli elections, but face legalized discrimination. Yara Hawari is a Palestinian with Israeli citizenship.
This ID system.
So this is the third, like, if we are to make distinctions between Palestinians, this is the third layer of discrimination, which is Palestinians living within Israeli borders. Okay, so these are Palestinians with Israeli citizenship, and even they are also discriminated against in one, from like literally going from the westernmost point of the Gaza Strip all the way to you travel further east all the way to the fucking, or I'm using my east and west. Yeah, no, westernmost point further and further east, you will see 3 different kinds of Palestinian living. Okay? Starting with the most oppressed, which would be the Gaza Strip. Palestinians living in the Gaza Strip live on western point to eastern point. I said it right. Starting off with the westernmost point in the Gaza Strip, you have the Palestinians, the more than 2 million Palestinians living in the Gaza Strip that are the most oppressed because they're living inside of a fucking open air prison that's consistently being bombed. Then within the boundaries of Israel, you have Palestinians with Israeli citizenship who are, out of the 3 groups, the least oppressed, yet still significantly marginalized and significantly oppressed against. And then lastly, on the eastern side, you have the occupied West Bank territory, where Palestinians live on their own land that is currently occupied by Israel, and they live under an apartheid regime.
It penetrates, all areas of life, where you live, where you study, what you work, etc. Even the more intimate areas of life, such as who you marry.
That's because for the most part, a Palestinian can't pass on their ID status to their spouse.
And this has huge implications on where they can live.
Dude, that is such freak shit, dude.
Many indeed actually end up leaving and choosing to live abroad because it is that difficult.
On rare occasions, Palestinians are able to change their ID, but only in one direction.
So for instance, if a Palestinian from East Jerusalem...
If you are a person, if you're a Palestinian with dual citizenship, maybe you're a Palestinian American, for example, you do not have a right to return as well. Like, there are Palestinians with citizenship to other countries living in the West Bank, and if they leave the West Bank, Israel will revoke their fucking status Israel will revoke their status of, like, Palestinians, revoke their right to return, basically. And the only way as a Palestinian you can change your, like, citizenship status is by losing it. It goes in one direction only.
Moves somewhere else inside the West Bank, they could lose their residency in East Jerusalem, and Israel, since it's considered that a downgrade, then that's a direction that would be feasible. And further down the line, again, from Israel's perspective, if West Bank...
It's not Ilhan Omar. Ilhan Omar is Somali. He's not Palestinian. You're thinking of Rashida Tlaib.
Bankers move to the Gaza Strip, then that's a direction that Israel will accept, but not in the opposite direction.
So while Palestinians are granted different rights based on their IDs, nowhere do those rights match those of Israeli Jews. Looks like we can check off at least one of the elements required for apartheid to apply. When Israel was founded in 1948, 700,000 Palestinians had fled or been forced out. The result was that the new state had a Jewish majority. To maintain that majority, Israel has never allowed the refugees to return. The Palestinians who remained were given Israeli citizenship, although they were kept under strict military rule for 19 years. But in 1967, when Israel occupied more lands, including Gaza, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem, it faced a problem. It wanted the land, but didn't want the Palestinians on that land. So it's refused to extend citizenship to the rest of the Palestinians under its control, while keeping them under military rule ever since. To further control the ratio of Palestinians to Israeli Jews, Israel still bans Palestinian refugees and their descendants from moving into any of the territories it controls, while encouraging any Jewish person anywhere in the world to immigrate to Israel, even if they've never set foot there before. In Jerusalem, the Israeli authorities actually have a population target: 60% Jews to 40% Palestinians. Palestinians in Jerusalem are only granted a permanent residency permit, even if they've been living in the city since before Israel was founded.
About 350,000 Palestinians are in that status, and which is Orwellian the way it's defined, because the only thing permanent in permanent residency is that it can actually always be taken away.
These permits can be revoked if a Palestinian moves out of the city, but Jewish Israelis living in Jerusalem never lose residency, even if they move to the other side of the world. This discrimination has been enshrined in Israeli law. The 2018 nation-state law says that Israel is the nation-state of the Jewish people, and that the right to national self-determination in the state of Israel is unique to the Jewish people. That means that even Palestinians with Israeli citizenship aren't considered equal to Jews with Israeli citizenship. As Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu put it, Israel is not a state of all its citizens, but rather the nation-state of the Jewish people, and only them. So let's go back to that list from before. The nation-state law is only one of many Israeli laws that explicitly discriminate against Palestinians. For example, there's the 1950 Absentees Property Law. Deeming Palestinian refugees absentees, Israel seized hundreds of thousands of acres of their land, even though they were only absent because Israel wouldn't let them return. Remember, denying people the right to return to their country is on the list of inhumane acts that legally make up the third element of apartheid. There are more Israeli policies that could fall under the category of inhumane acts, especially when it comes to land.
So Israel desires the land, even more so desires
Chad, shut the fuck up.
empty land or land that it makes empty, and doesn't desire the Palestinians living on that land. And that has resulted in policies in which land is constantly moving in one direction. Land that used to be Palestinian becomes state land, and then that land is allocated for the development of towns and communities for Jewish citizens.
And yes, expropriation of land is also an inhumane act. So let's see what that looks like on the ground. Across the entire territory, Palestinian communities are overcrowded and surrounded by Jewish-only communities.
It's the same type of practice of encircling Palestinian communities so that they can't expand, cutting them off from one another. It's a continuous practice that began in 1948 and was expanded to the West Bank in 1967.
The Israeli state prioritizes Jewish development in places where it wants to restrict the growth of Palestinian communities, with the government keen to Judaize areas like the Galilee and the Negev.
Israeli politicians frequently use that term to Judaize an area, in other words, to ensure Israeli Jewish dominance in a particular area, where the government has a concern over the Palestinian demography. And in any other context, this would be condemned as, gross ethnic engineering. It's in its basic laws, which is essentially the Israeli constitution. The land is deemed for the Jewish people, not the Israeli people, but the Jewish people.
In fact, only 3% of the land inside Israel's 1948 borders is allocated for its Palestinian citizens. Meanwhile, hundreds of new communities have been built for its Jewish citizens, many on the ruins of destroyed Palestinian villages. Plus, there's the 200 illegal Jewish settlements that have been built across the West Bank as well. At the same time, thousands of Palestinian homes have been demolished or are under threat of demolition, having been built without permits because Israel rejects most Palestinian building applications. Meanwhile, in the Negev desert, the Israeli government wants to maximize the land available for Jewish development. So it has tried to force Palestinian Bedouin citizens into small townships by demolishing their homes and not allowing them to connect to the water and power grids. One village, El Araqib, has been demolished more than 180 times.
Now, just across the Green Line, a similar struggle is taking place in the village of Susia, which is in the West Bank.
Do you understand why when people say like apartheid isn't a good word to use here, like they're fucking insane and delusional? It is the only word to use here, and it's the light term to describe what's going on. That's why I say it's like the luckier in comparison to the Palestinians living in Gaza Strip, like the luckier version. Aristocracy needs to learn her place. When did her head get so big? How does an uneducated VTuber think her voice is important? I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. I don't know enough about this person but like regardless, it just fucking reeks of like weird. I can't tell if you're trying to bait drama by like, I feel like it just seems like you're trying to bait drama by spamming that shit over and over again. I don't know why he typed in the wrong chat. Fucking know your place rhetoric is really stupid.
Just south of Hebron, and it too has faced a series of mass demolitions by authorities in an attempt to establish Israeli Jewish control over the area.
Looks like we can check off another one of the criteria for apartheid. Israel has total control of this entire territory.
I permanently banned that guy who kept saying like, are you a Gulen supporter? Are you a Gulen supporter? Obviously, I'm not a fucking Fethullah Gulen supporter, you dumb motherfucker. Do I strike you as the type of person who either A, likes the CIA, and therefore would like a CIA asset like Fethullah Gulen, or be like a fundamentalist, like a fundamentalist Muslim, which Fethullah Gulen is, like literally fucking, you're so brain dead and you keep fucking spamming it over and over again.
Territory. Even in Gaza and the West Bank, which have some limited autonomous Palestinian administration in place, Israel controls the borders, trade, resources, water, electricity, the airspace, the electromagnetic spectrum, the
So the electromagnetic spectrum is really fucked up. Like they control everything. They control the borders, trade, resources. She brought up, and when she says the electromagnetic spectrum, she means like Israel literally controls radio frequencies, Wi-Fi, telecommunications. Like I'm gonna expand on that. Like Israel controls all matter of telecommunications within Palestine, within like Palestinian territory, whether it be the Gaza Strip or whether it be in the West Bank. They can read your text messages. They can send you text messages, and they do often. They often do that. They control everything. Like sometimes they will stop you from uploading. So you can, for example, you can be on the internet and you can see other people's shit, but you can't fucking message one another or do like live streams because they've shut off uploading capabilities.
borders, trade, resources, water, electricity, the airspace, the electromagnetic spectrum, the population.
Does that not mean Gaza Strip does not have the infrastructure to handle themselves, so Israel provides it? Israel prevents Gaza from and Palestinians from having the developmental capabilities for that.
Registry and more. Accusing a government of carrying out a crime against humanity like apartheid.
It's like saying, oh man, the Gaza Strip just like doesn't have any fucking neurosurgeons. I wonder why. Maybe because they keep bombing schools and they murdered the last remaining one in the Gaza Strip. Do you see what I'm saying? It's not that like, they're incapable of building this shit out. It's because they're occupied and Israel keeps murdering them.
Apartheid is no simple matter, but we've seen how Israel's control over and discrimination against Palestinians fits the legal threshold for apartheid. Israel's own leaders knew this was happening, although they didn't do much to stop it.
The state that you have at the moment is an apartheid state, isn't it?
It's not yet apartheid, but it might come on this slippery slope toward apartheid.
That's fucking Ehud Barak, by the way. Like Jeffrey Epstein's friend, Ehud Barak. Like former Israeli prime ministers, like, oh, it might become, it might go towards apartheid. It is. It has been. It was under his administration as well. But when you have a fucking former Israeli prime minister saying that shit, like, understand that, like, we are definitely there and have been there for a while.
Apartheid, but it might come on this slippery slope toward apartheid.
Still, how could apartheid apply to Israel when, say, Palestinian citizens can vote?
So as a Palestinian citizen of Israel, I cannot question the fundamental constitution of Israel, which says that the state is for the Jewish people and the Jewish people alone. My citizenship doesn't allow for inclusion in that state. And so therefore, participation in Israeli elections or in the Knesset is really nominal and has no potential to change policy.
Another argument against the accusation of apartheid is that the occupation is only temporary, and when it ends, Palestinians will rule themselves.
Normal people don't think that 54 years is temporary. We've passed that line already a very long time ago. And yeah, there's a lot of Israeli propaganda insisting on that worldview of democracy plus temporary occupation. No, it's not a democracy and it's not a temporary occupation. It's one regime between the river and the sea, and that regime is apartheid.
How do Palestinians resist without being labeled as terrorists? They don't. Every Palestinian that has resisted against the Israeli state has routinely been locked up with fake charges, including like literally fucking activists and journalists that are on camera while they're getting processed. I was listening to another interview. I forget what her name is. It was on Deconstructed with Ryan Grimm. And this person, wait, was it? Who did Ryan Grimm interview on Deconstructed? Maryam Barghouti, friend of the show, Ryan, interviewed Maryam Barghouti, who is a Palestinian-American journalist in Ramallah, in occupied West Bank, who talked about like Ramallah being the center of operations of the Palestinian Authority and all that sort of stuff. And at a like, it used to be illegal to even fucking fly the Palestinian flag. That was considered illegal. And the Israeli authorities said that they apprehended her at a protest, declared the protest illegal, but because there were cameras on at the protest that she was at, they couldn't put all of these like false charges. They were literally openly in front of her talking about like they moved her illegally from her home in the West Bank to Israeli territory within the borders of Israel, which is illegal. You can't do that. You can't extradite someone like that. Then they made like these false charges up literally in front of her, straight up like, yeah, we're going to just say that you were throwing a stone. But because all of that was on video, those charges would not have stuck. And because it's like visible because she's a journalist, they just kept her under illegal detention for 10 fucking days. And, told her that she had to plead guilty, kind of similar to the Japanese criminal justice system. Of course, the Israeli system has, Israeli criminal justice system has a 99.4% conviction rate. Everyone just happens to be illegal of doing, acts against the Israeli state that are deemed terroristic. 99.4% conviction rate, boys. They're just too good. IDF labeled the 200 Palestinians that they killed terrorists. The IDF, Operation Guardian of the Walls, 200 plus terrorists neutralized. Yeah, like, 65 babies, also terrorists. Very cool. Thank you for, your sick Guardian of the Walls. I mean, this is disgusting, dude. These people are fucking disgusting. I guess that 10-year-old boy you showed being arrested is the 6%, 0.6%. No. That person is also probably a terrorist. It's great. "13 people killed in Israel, 200 plus terrorists neutralized," dude. Fucking disgusting. This is Nazi rhetoric. It just is. Your enemies are not human, they're subhuman. And they're vermin. That's literally what the fucking Nazis did through and through. So I'm sorry if you get offended or if you consider it to be fucking anti-Semitic when I say like Israel's violent and bloodthirsty occupation is reminiscent of Nazi propaganda and also is literally Nazi shit. Then you're